Night of the Swan. Another story of fairy ancestry is that of the Night of the Swan, to explain the ancestries of the houses of Bouillon, Clovis, Oldenburg, and Hesse. The story of the Night of the Swan is connected to a well-known medieval folktale known as the Swan Children. The story of the Swan Children is recounted by Johannes de Alta Silva, a Cistercian monk of the 12th century, in his version of the story of the Seven Wise Masters in Latin prose, entitled De Regiti Septem Sapientibus, on the King and the Seven Sages, but better known by the title it was later given, Dolipathos. According to the tale, which was adapted into the French Les Romans de Dolipathos by the poet Herbert, a young lord becomes lost in the hunt for a white stag and wanders into an enchanted forest where he falls instantly in love with a mysterious woman in the act of bathing. The young lord brings her to his castle, where she gives birth to a septuplet, 6 boys and a girl, with golden chains about their necks. But her evil mother-in-law had them transformed into swans. The 7 children are eventually changed back into human form, except one, who becomes the swan in the Swan Night tale. 50. The earliest versions preserved in Dolipathos do not provide specific identity to this night, but the Old French Crusade cycle of Chansons de Geste adapted it to make the Swan Night, Le Chevalier au Cygne, first produced around 1192, the legendary ancestor of Godfrey of Bouillon. The first episode, the Naissance du Chevalier au Cygne, survives in 2 forms, of Iliox who has children with King Lothair, and Beatrix who married King Orient. In both accounts, they have 7 children, who are all turned into swans. All but one is able to transform back into human form, and leads the boat of one of his brothers, known as the Swan Knight. The Swan Knight comes to the defense of the dispossessed Duchess of Bouillon, whose land has been seized by Renier of Saxony, whom he challenges to a duel. The Swan Knight defeats Renier and wins the Duchess' daughter in marriage. Their daughter Ida, who can see the future, knows that she is destined to be the mother of Eustace III of Boulogne, Godfrey of Bouillon, and Baldwin I of Jerusalem. The Swan Knight, however, must leave Bouillon when his wife asks his true identity. After leaving Bouillon, his name is revealed to be Elias, and his brother, the swan who led his boat, finally regains his human form. The German poet Wolfram von Eschenbach, a knight of Bavarian origin, incorporated the Swan Knight Lohengrin into his Arthurian epic Partival in the 13th century, believing the version of the Grail story by Chrétien de Troyes, Fluid c. 1160–1191, was wrong and less accurate than his own. Chrétien de Troyes is known for first writing of Lancelot, Percival, and the Holy Grail. Chrétien de Troyes' Perceval tells of Perceval's visit to the Grail castle, where he sees a Graal borne in by a damsel. Its accompaniments are a bleeding lance and a silver plate. It is a precious vessel set with jewels, and so resplendent as to eclipse the lights of the hall. All the assembled knights show it reverence. Mindful of an injunction not to inquire too much, Perceval does not ask concerning the significance of what he sees, and thereby incurs guilt and reproach. Though Chrétien's poem was left unfinished, it was continued by 4 different authors who gave different endings to it. Wolfram's Partival, written between 1200 and 1210, was the most celebrated romance of the time. Wolfram also wrote Wilhelm, an unfinished poem about the military feats of Guillaume de Gallon against the Muslims. Wolfram claimed to have obtained his information from a certain Quiote de Provence, who would have been Guillaume de Provence, d. after 1208, a troubadour and monk at Cluny. According to Wolfram, Quiote had uncovered a neglected Arabic manuscript in Moorish Toledo, Spain. Wolfram maintains that Quiote, in turn, supposedly received the Grail story from Phlegetonese, a Muslim astronomer and a descendant of Solomon who had found the secrets of the Holy Grail written in the stars. According to Wolfram, a heathen Phlegetonese had achieved high renown for his learning. This scholar of nature was descended from Solomon and born of a family which had long been Israelite until baptism became our shield against the fire of hell. He wrote the Adventure of the Grail. On his father's side, Phlegetonese was a heathen, who worshipped a calf. The heathen Phlegitones could tell us how all the stars set and rise again. To the circling course of the stars man's affairs and destiny are linked. Phlegitones the heathen saw with his own eyes in the constellations things he was shy to talk about, hidden mysteries. He said there was a thing called the Grail, whose name he had read clearly in the constellations. A host of angels left it on the earth. Since then, baptized men have had the task of guarding it, and with such chaste discipline that those who are called to the service of the Grail are always noble men. Thus wrote Phlegitones of these things. 51. According to Wolfram, after learning Arabic to read Phlegitones' document, Kjot traveled throughout Europe to learn more about the Grail and the brotherhood that protected it. He finally came to Anjou, where he found the history of Percival's family and wrote the tale which would later be retold by Wolfram. At Toledo, where Kjot is said to have learned about the Grail, was the famous Toledo school of translators, where numerous works on astrology were being translated Jewish Kabbalists, including the Picatrix. There were other schools at Girona, Montpellier, and elsewhere in the south of France. As well, there was also such a school at Troyes, which dated from 1070, and was conducted by Rashi. There may also be an alchemical connection involved in the object of the Grail itself. To Wolfram, the Grail is an emerald fallen from Lucifer's crown when he was cast out of heaven. The emerald is the sacred stone of the planet Venus, whose other name is Lucifer. Wolfram's version of the story appears to borrow from a Persian legend regarding Lucifer's struggle in heaven. His source may have been the Arabic manuscript he cites in attributing the ideas contained in his book. The legends suggest that when God decided to expel Lucifer, the angels were forced to take sides and chose either God or the devil. But there were a few neutral angels, who refused to fall in with either camp. And when Lucifer lost his emerald, they were the ones who brought the stone to earth, where it served as an emblem of the struggle to find the middle way in this life, to locate the middle ground between good and evil. 52. Wolfram may also be making reference to the famous alchemical work, the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, introduced to Europe by the Arabs. Reliance on a writer who was quite possibly involved in alchemy would explain why he envisioned the Grail not as a cup but as a stone of the purest kind, which sounds suspiciously like a reference to the Philosopher's Stone. In fact, Wolfram claimed for the Grail powers similar to those that the alchemists attributed to the Philosopher's Stone. Both allegedly gave to their possessors spiritual perfection, union with God, and release from the fear of death. Such power does the stone give a man that flesh and bones are at once made young again, Wolfram wrote in Partible. 53. Wolfram, referring to the Templars, also claims Kjot's research had revealed a genealogical connection between the account of the Grail, and the sons of baptized men hold it and guard it with humble heart, and the best of mankind shall those knights be who have in such service part. 54. According to Wolfram, the Grail sustained the lives of a brotherhood of knights called Templizan, who are guardians of the Temple of the Grail. Like their real-life counterparts, who made their home in a palace near the site of Solomon's Temple, the Templizan were headquartered in a castle. This fictional castle was called Montsalvisk, or Mountain of Salvation, a name which recalls Montségur, the mountain fortress of the Cathars in Languedoc. 55. In Wolfram's Partible, the story of the knight Swan is attached to Lohorangren, the son of the Partible and the queen of Pelopirc and Dwyramers. One day, in his castle Montsalvisk, he hears a bell toll as a signal to come to the aid of a damsel in distress. As in other versions, Lohorangren is a knight who arrives in a swan-poled boat to defend a lady, in this case Elsa of Brabant. They marry, but he must leave when she breaks the promise of not asking his name. In the late 13th century, the poet Nuhasuz adapted and expanded Wolfram's story into the romance Lohengrin. Probably the work through which the Swan Knight story is best known today through Wagner, who adapted the tale into his popular opera Lohengrin in 1848.